So the little arrow next to image trace, we're going to click on that, and then we can choose from a variety of settings. If you've just got something that's like a pencil drawing or a pen drawing, you could choose like sketch art or line art, and it does pretty well there. But I like to choose, 16 colors is too many. We're going to have to reduce it, but we're going to talk about that too today. Right, because we need to get this down to 8 to 10 colors across all three of the prints for our conversational print. They all have to be from the same 8 to 10 colors. And it does take a while to auto trace, and so the bigger the picture that you bring in, the longer it's going to take, and also like the more unwieldy kind of your file gets. Auto trace can be very it can make the computer run pretty slow. It's not always the best way to do everything. Sometimes tracing your artwork with the pen tool is more straightforward. But if we zoom in on this now, we can see that it doesn't get blurry as we zoom in. And that's because it's now made of vectors. It's just made of like thousands of vectors. And we can't edit any of them yet directly until we choose expand up here. If we want to, though, before we choose expand and make it into like an editable function or an editable object, we can choose this little panel button over here, and the image trace panel pops up, okay? So all we've done so far is basically put a JPEG in here and then choose image trace 16 colors, okay? And then we chose this to get the panel, just as a quick review. And in here we can edit things more specifically. Like instead of just 16 colors, we could go all the way up to 30. Although I think 16 is suiting this just fine. But some other things that are important to note is how you can affect how Illustrator fits to the artwork, right? So I can lower its, right now it's trying to fit pretty tight to the way my artwork actually was. And if I lower this, it's gonna have to think again, but it should kind of smooth out some of these lines. Maybe I don't want that kind of like kind of nubbly texture that's showing up on the outside of my brush marks, right? This is all gouache. And if I unchecked preview, I could do a few things at once and then hit trace. If you leave preview checked, it's going to affect it every time you adjust it. So that smoothed it out a little bit. So corners means that it'll be smoother as well if you have less corners. And then noise, if you raise noise up to 100 pixels or whatever, it will ignore tiny like specks in it that are smaller than 100 pixels. And that can also kind of increase the crispness of it. You can choose, in general, I always choose to create abutting paths, but you can choose to create overlapping paths, like it would create like a rectangle of white and then put like all the black over that in individual shapes, and then it's a little bit more complicated. But abutting ones just make an individual shape for like the cat, and then the cat's ear is like another shape, and this shape has a hole in it where the cat's ear is. Okay. So we'll trace it one more time and then I'll get into it. Okay, so I'm not sure how much that really changed, but We are going to hit expand now. Right now it has an X through it. When we hit expand, it will not have an X through it, and you'll be able to see when you select it all of the little individual lines that are making it up. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of most of the white background. I risk a little bit losing these white things, but I think I'm going to use the magic wand tool anyway. So similar to the magic wand tool in Photoshop, Illustrator will select all of the white when you click on one thing that is white, right? It chooses all the color. So there, that got rid of the background. And you can affect the tolerance of the magic wand tool, like how much near the white it picks up, right? By double clicking, and you can adjust it double clicking on the tool. Okay, I don't use the magic wand tool very often in Illustrator, but it is handy. Oh, we lost some of the mouse. So I am not going to take many of these elements to make my spell. And it would be hard for me to choose these elements because I've unfortunately compacted all of my motifs onto this page in like a disorganized way. Like if I try to click and drag around this, first off, it's still grouped. After you auto trace stuff, it's always still grouped, and I forgot. So we have to right click on it and choose ungroup. It would be hard for me to choose just this motif, and I might like accidentally, like it seems like it worked okay, but I did actually leave behind a little tiny piece of it. Not that big a deal, but if I was trying to choose like just these bottles, it would get a little harder without the lasso tool. So similar to the lasso tool in Photoshop, you can use the lasso tool. And I still have trouble with it when it's not the polygonal lasso tool, but you can use the lasso tool to trace around shapes and select whole shapes, but I'm doing a terrible job. And I really should, if I was thinking ahead that I was going to make this into a textile design instead of just doodling, I should have spread these motifs out much more, but instead I was kind of just having fun. So we'll take this spell book and the cat, I guess. See, I still forgot that one guy. So the problem with this is that it's the white selection tool. So the black selection tool is maybe the better choice in some cases. But see, that did leave behind a bunch of his tail, but I guess that's okay. And I'm going to actually select these now that they're out here and group them so that I won't have to do this anymore, right? I can pick these and move them around as a motif. So I guess we'll just grab one more thing. So that is auto tracing, and what I can do if I would like is really get in here into these auto traced guys and choose like specific anchor points, and I could make his ears pointier. You know, I could really finesse out some of this guy, and he's made of two subtly different colors of black right now. Which is a little annoying, but I could potentially group him together. Like if I selected most of him and I wanted to get rid of those, I can use my Pathfinder tools. And if we choose union, it will like kind of combine those shapes. Of course, it removes the eyes and it put the eyes in the back. And I think it actually joined them together. So if I were more careful and these were ungrouped, that is an option. And you could also smooth them out. So let's actually ungroup this briefly. And and I am going to union it, and that removed some of the awkwardness in his tail there. And then if I go to Object, with it selected, Object, Path, Simplify, okay. If we check Preview, we can make them into very simple shapes. Curve precision higher means more close to your original shape, right? But even taking it to 96% of its original shape, and the angle threshold is again like how much of a corner can it make. So maybe I wanted it really smooth. I can do something like this with no corners and a high curve precision, so it's still really close to my shape. And now if I went to edit it, it would have a lot less anchor points and maybe be a little bit more manageable, you know. It can take some finesse cleaning these shapes up. So it is also an option to just kind of leave them with this nice texture of your brush or your pencil. So I guess I will make a quick repeating pattern out of these. We'll do it with a gray background. And for this assignment, for your conversationals, you are supposed to not do any straight repeats, right? And so we're going to review making half drops and bricks. Okay. You guys have questions so far? Did auto trace make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did actually have a question.
Yeah.
You first auto trace, and then you brought up the extra one now.
Yeah.
I thought I didn't, because I thought you were like.
No,
oh,
it is subtle there. So if we have to have an image to see it. So I'll just place this one again really quick. But after we choose image trace, and I wonder what the quickest image trace would be, but we'll just click it and see. So see, I just chose image trace and it did something random, and we can still change it though. We can choose the image trace panel here.
Okay.
And that's how you get this guy. And then we don't even have to necessarily deal with this like advanced section. You can just change like the presets again, you know, to something else. But I'm just gonna delete this guy for now. Image trace is very handy. It's how I do a lot of my work, although it is still valuable to know how to use the the pen tool. And the pen tool, especially like later on when we're learning how to do flats, like next semester when we're learning how to do illustrations, like fashion illustrations, all of that, the pen tool is going to be much more important. So, okay, so this guy, I'm going to do a half drop, right? So where this guy comes off over here, he's going to come on over there. So there is space for him over there, kind of thinking ahead. And then where this guy comes off up here, he's going to have to move down there. So maybe I rotate this a little more and just have it sticking off like that, something like that. Maybe we can do the bottom. And I'm going to drag out my guides right now. So remember, in order to get guides, the rulers need to be on. So we can show rulers by going to View, Rulers, Show Rulers, and then you can click and drag on the rulers to get the guide. Except we actually need a horizontal guide. And if I have my background rectangle selected, I can use it right away. So ideally, this square would be some numbers that are easy to remember. So I might try to readjust it for that. And you can kind of do that after you get close to the size. You can, that like would work perfectly. You could round it back to some regular numbers. And by regular, I mean, oh, right, we don't want to, here we go. Sorry, I moved the center. Okay. So because this is round numbers 3.5 and 4 inches, I can figure out what half of them is exactly. For example, this shape is going to have to move over 3.5 inches and then up 2 inches because 2 is half of 4. So there's a number of ways we can do this. The way I showed you last week, we don't necessarily have to split this until the very end, but I guess I'm going to split them all now because I think I've thought about this well enough where they aren't going to overlap a huge amount, right? Because that one comes over there, that one. If they're on the halfway mark on the sides, that makes things a little bit more complicated, right? Because then it's going to go, you're going to have to split it again because it'll be going like half off the top. So I like to kind of make my things less complicated by trying to keep them all going off of 1/4 at a time, at least at this stage in our construction, but it's not too impossible to split it again. So copy and paste the background, edit paste in front, puts it in exactly the same spot, no problem. And then I'll just try selecting all of them and choosing divide and seeing how it goes. So it split them. And we can then start transforming them. So right click, transform, move, and we can type in our numbers. So it was -3.5 to the left and 2 inches up. And if we check preview, we can see that it fits in the right spot. Same thing down here.
Oh, the gem.
Yeah, it is overlapping with the spell book, which I think it's fine. We could end up putting the spell book maybe behind the cat, like maybe there's some layering going on, which I don't know. We'll see how it looks. So again, right click, transform, move, except I didn't get all of the pieces there. So I'm actually going to undo and zoom in. So the part of the problem with auto trace, and maybe we should have addressed this sooner and made it less colors sooner, is that it ends up with kind of all of these subtle layers where there were like subtle differences in your line color. And it can end up being difficult to pick up all the pieces. Except now it's +2, it's, wait, yeah, -2 inches because their negatives are backwards. Their negative means up. I think. Nope. There we go. Move. But this guy has to go. And now this bottom piece just goes straight across, like directly across. So this is the half drop. And so it moves horizontal 0 inches and vertical 4 inches. It disappeared. I assume it's probably behind the background. I also did miss some stuff there, but I think it's fine if I just delete that. I'm gonna hit OK and zoom out and see if we, oh no, it moved down. Classic, classic Kelsey. Anyway, so you would do the opposite for the brick, right? For the brick, it moves over to the right when you want to put the bottom across to the top. That's when they're crossing. Okay, so I have to delete the guides or lock the guides, right? When the guides end up being selected like this, when we go to make it into a pattern, the proportions don't work. So I'm going to go to View, Guides, and Lock Guides. And now when we select it, see the guides don't turn blue anymore. And then we can go to Object, Pattern, Make. And if we tell it it's a half drop, although it looks like I have something that's poking out beyond the edge of the background that's making a line, but there it does line up okay, but I just have to hit cancel and zoom in down here first. So whatever you click on in Illustrator is what it zooms in on, so it's helpful to click on stuff before you start zooming. It orients you better. It's also a little annoying because sometimes it'll zoom in on something that you don't remember having selected. So that's better. There might still be something going on, but that is an option for your repeats. Is this is working in gouache or in paints, or even you could do this with a line drawing to a certain extent, and working with it that way. But you can also, you're welcome to draw with the pen tool too, and I just want to review the pen tool a little bit. So I'm going to make another artboard. So how are you guys doing with the pen tool? Yeah. Some mixed bags. If you're having a lot of trouble, I would recommend going back to the worksheets, these like drills. But yeah, what was your question?
So we just scan like what we paint?
Yeah. Yes, I didn't go over how to get it onto the computer. Yeah, or even taking a picture with like a Scan It app or whatever on your phone, because the Scan It app makes the background really clean, but Yeah, the scanner over there works, and it's pretty straightforward. We could go over it though. I haven't used that particular scanner. But you're like, honestly, you could take a picture with your phone and auto trace it. The only problem is if the background is like has a variance in it, the auto trace will pick that up, you know, if it has a shadow or if the paper is curved. So the scanner is a little better. So I'm actually going to throw this guy on its own layer and lock it. Really quick, how to move things from layer to layer. We haven't really talked about that. You can right click on it and choose arrange and send to current layer, but my favorite way to do it is in the layers panel. Okay, so if I want to put this guy on this new layer I just made, with it selected, this blue dot on the right, that represents everything that's selected on this first layer, on layer 1, and I can just click and drag that blue dot to layer 2 and see the color changed, and that means that it's on the red layer 2 now. So that dot, you can just drag it to whatever layer you want, and whatever's selected will move to that new layer. So I could put that on a layer and lock it, and then make a new layer and start drawing on it. So again, we are we're making handles and we're making anchor points when we're drawing with the pen tool. So I just clicked and placed just an anchor point, and it doesn't have any handles coming off of it. And that is okay, because in this, it's just going to make a straight line if I click again, but instead of just clicking again, I can click and drag. Can you guys see this green on the screen, or should I change the color? Okay. So I can click and drag, and if I'm deciding to trace clockwise, I have to click and drag kind of clockwise. So I mean clockwise, like I'm going around this green shape in a clockwise direction. It is annoying. You have to be sure when you're using the pen tool, and when you first start, you might have to swap your fill for nothing, right? So we want your fill to have a Ghostbusters symbol in it if you're tracing something, because it's just annoying otherwise. And then I'm not necessarily, like, I could click here and get, like, I would know that it would be exactly lined up with my shape. But I'm instead going to go a little bit further on, because I know that the handles that I drag out are going to make up for this curve to the back. So I could even go all the way over here, right? And when I click and drag going out, I can get a curve back there that's pretty close. Now though, this has a giant handle going out front, and I wanted to make a pretty sharp handle. So how do we make a corner, guys? What button do we press when we're using the pen tool?
Shift.
It's not shift. Alt. Alt. And when you hit Alt, you can adjust your right hand handle, in this case, separately from your handle that's dragging out behind your path, or affecting your previous path. So I can adjust this as much as I want holding Alt. So I'm even gonna I'm gonna put it back like pretty far on top of itself. Maybe that was too far. And I can always hit Alt and like adjust, like I don't have to do it just once. And click and drag out. And again, I went kind of like further on than I might think, because I know that the handles are going to give me that structure that I need. And I really, generally, you want less anchor points, because it's easier to manipulate things that have less anchor points, and they also look smoother. So yeah, Alt to do that. But what if we wanted to change something to a corner? Say I drew this and I decided that some of these shapes, I didn't put in any corners at all. I just started dragging. We can change some of these to corners, like these tip ones, right? Here, let me zoom in. this is not a corner and maybe I want it to be, right? If we use the white selection tool and click on it, the white selection tool allows us to adjust these handles and anchor points. Like we could do this. But we could choose to convert it and get rid of the handles, right? So this would turn it into just a straight anchor point, no handles. So I'm going to click it. And that works okay, except now I have to rely on all of these to give this my definition, where maybe I do want handles on that to like really get it to curve to the left first. So I'm going to hit Command Z twice. And instead of doing that, again, with my white selection tool, I'm going to hold Alt. And if I hold Alt with my white selection tool, I can grab a handle and adjust it however I want it and make it into a corner. To convert it back to a smooth point, it's the other conversion tool over here. So I can click this and click this guy up here, and it moves it back into a smooth line, right? So Alt allows me to turn things into corners, both with the pen tool and with the white selection tool, Alt. And then you can convert it back to smooth lines like that. And even though I just drew this very haphazardly, I mean, you guys saw me just kind of throw down those anchor points quickly, you can go back in with the white selection tool at any time and, you know, try to get things a lot closer. So your handles don't have to be the same length on either side, right? You can adjust the handle of one of them smaller. That's the most common thing you do after drawing with the white selection tool, is adjust the length of the handle. And even with just a few anchor points here, like I can get very close to this shape. And I don't have to work from my own artwork, right? I could work from a photograph of a dog or a, you know, another type of artwork. And I could also auto trace a photo of a dog. So we did a pug last time. If I get this image in here, we can image trace it, and we can try image tracing it with, you know, just like 6 colors, and it's going to make it into something, you know, that's still readable as a pug, but it's very graphic. Now this does have a very like kind of obvious look to it. Like you can tell when something is an auto traced image. But you could take this and then, right, I'm going to lower the paths again and the corners and stuff, and make it really kind of curvy. And then it's still readable as a dog. I can hit expand and I can get rid of the background. And I could manipulate this pretty easily. I mean, there aren't that many shapes in here. I could also, and so I could make it into something a little bit more, you know, a little bit more my own. I could simplify it into something very less dog. I don't know. I think auto trace is fun to play with, although I think it's more worthwhile to do it on your own artwork.
Even though we can like paint things, can we also take pictures of things and use that in auto trace?
Yeah, especially if it's your own photograph. I don't have a problem with that at all. And then especially if you're like working it and you're making it into something that's more pleasing, like I would probably work with this for ages before I was happy with it. But yeah, so I'm trying to think. So one of your conversationals should be narrative or scenic, right? So where This one is just filled with like random motifs. For that one, we would be looking for something more, maybe more a little bit like a toile, but I don't think you have to take narrative super literally. The boys weren't here for when we discussed timorous beasties, but toiles are like a historical type of generally wallpaper, but like fabric textile design, where they have these kind of like scenic images kind of isolated from one another. And Timorous Beasties is a company that does modern toiles of like city images, and they have images where like people are like being mugged and they're shooting up. So this London one has a good close-up. So first off, you can see the man being mugged there, but then in this close-up, you can see these kind of just, I don't know.
Those are so cool.
Yeah, the Timorous Beasties is so inspirational. They're so modern, and they're just updating. It's so interesting. They do other stuff. I mean, this is kind of what got them well known, but they do. Yeah, $90 a roll, so it's kind of expensive. But they do like just like really sick wallpaper, super cool. So that is kind of where I'm thinking of like narrative, but however you want to involve a narrative in your print, it doesn't have to be so obvious. A narrative or scenic, it says.
So we tell like a story?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and yeah, that's something you could be thinking of in a lot of your textile designs. So I'm gonna put this PowerPoint on the Moodle as well.
You said one of them.
Yep, only one. So the other ones could be, straight ice cream cones, like.
Or plugs of ice cream. Ice cream.
Yeah, just pugs eating ice cream. Okay, so I think this is where I want to end that lecture today. We did good. Any other questions?